world's best rocket scientist isn't the world's best marine biologist. Just like the world's strongest man probably couldn't nail Swan Lake. Being a specialist means not being great at lots of other things. It takes dedicated focus. But that sort of focus is out of fashion. Today, everyone wants to be a generalist. Not at NetApp. We're proud to be specialists. We don't make laptops. You don't want us to create a TV show? Seriously. We can't do what our customers do. What we do is provide the most cutting-edge and remarkable cloud storage services on the planet, which might not make us a great DJ. But it does let us help you access your data in the right place at the right time. There's plenty of things we can't do, but we can connect your cloud to on-prem and have them get along like BFFs. BFFs that reduce costs and improve data availability, obviously. Cooking Michelin-star food? Sorry. Analyzing data to maximize your security and maintain compliance? Take a seat. Puppy training? No. Optimizing application performance in data centers and on the cloud? Good boy. It's all we think about. Unlocking more than you ever thought possible from your cloud. So when you're thinking about cloud storage, why just be in good hands? When you can be in the mother flippin' specialist's hands. The cloud storage specialists. NetApp.
Hello and welcome to the NetApp Amplify series, a virtual space and place where we bring together some of the sharpest minds in tech to deep dive into the industry's biggest challenges. In this session, we'll be talking about multi-hybrid cloud. Organizations today are looking deeper into managing performance, the benefits of a hybrid multi-cloud over single cloud, and reducing complexity to remove the fear of cloud adoption. Lots to talk about and lots of attendees from right across Asia Pacific today to ensure that you all have the best strategy in place to transform faster and achieve the business outcomes you expect. Today, we explore the latest concerns and scenarios trending with today's CIOs. Before we get into it though, there are some housekeeping matters to attend to. We'd ask you to be respectful to the other attendees of the session with your mics and cameras. Please mute your mics throughout the session, and your camera, you will notice the feed is off by default. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of today's Amplify series session. So if you do have a question for either of our panelists today, feel free to use the Q&A function you'll see in the bottom of your screen. The chat function is there. We'll take those questions and we'll moderate those at the end of today's session. In the meantime, if you do need to leave for any reason, for those of you who are new to Zoom, the leave meeting button, the red leave meeting button is in the bottom right-hand corner. So that's it for housekeeping. Moving on to the agenda for today's session. And we've got two great speakers for you today to talk about multi-hybrid cloud. The first is Tom Seglarek, Principal Consultant and Capability Lead, should I say, for Hybrid Cloud at Telstra Purple. He's a founding member of Purple's Enterprise Solutions and Capability function and covers strategy, execution models, and enablement. Joining Tom today is Sean Scott, a technologist and digital transformation specialist in hybrid cloud services. Sean provides innovative solutions for NetApp's commercial, enterprise, federal, and service providers, customers. In today's edition of NetApp's Amplify series, we cover the top CIO concerns for cloud adoption, the most popular hybrid cloud scenarios, and recommendations from Australian and New Zealand IT executives. All that and more coming up. In the meantime, though, we have a little trivia game to play with you. Make sure you're all perked up, whether it's morning in East Asia or lunchtime on the east coast of Australia and indeed into New Zealand. We have a trivia game with some prizes to win. Some fun little questions here about NetApp. So if you use the QR code to scan on your mobile device, will be the optimum way to play for a bit of second screen interactivity. For those of you without a mobile or second screen device, there is a URL in the chat function. In the Zoom chat function, there is a URL there that will take you to the web page. Alternatively, for those of you with very quick fingers, the URL is there. though I suspect the QR code on your mobile device is the easiest. There's a few pages there for you to click through. I'd ask you to fill in your full names on the landing page. And the reason for that is of course, should you win, we need to know who to send the prizes to. There are, I believe, the top 3 will win a prize today. But then again, let's see how we get on. So enter your full name and then click play. We're going to click through how to play and straight into the first question, I guess, assuming everyone is now logged in, up and running, and with their full name in. We've got 6 questions to go through today. They are multi-choice. Some are easier than others, including a quite simple true or false question to wrap. So I'm going to assume that everyone has managed to load that page up and got their full name in and ready to play. I note Gonzo is joining us again for this session of the Amplify series. He was one of the leaders in our previous session. So looking forward to seeing your result today, Gonzo. For the elves in the background who are going to pull up the trivia, I think we might be ready to get started. So like I said, 6 questions today. And we'll start with question 1, which is a pretty straightforward one when the elves are ready. Question 1, what is the color of the NetApp logo? Now, I will note that it's been through a bit of a brand refresh of late. It's looking very slick. So that for those of you playing at home, is it A, purple, B, blue, C, black, or D, pink? It's one of the 4. And I'm not going to give you too much time to answer. Yeah, so thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. But please enter your answers into the trivia landing page. The URL is in the chat function there. So question 1, I'll wrap that, I think, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And elves, if we could see some of the answers. Wow, okay. So yeah, no longer blue, team. There is 3/4 of the audience would have been correct a few months back, but the new NetApp logo is in fact blue. So 26.3% of our audience off to a flying start. Moving on to question 2. Question 2, what is the original founding name of NetApp? Net application, network application, network appliance, or NET app? 4 options there. What was the original founding name of NetApp? So you either know it or you don't. I won't give you time to Google it. So I'll close it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. Excellent. We've got a good spread there, team. But 70.6% of you, 7 out of 10, have nailed that one. Network appliance was the original founding name of NetApp. That was question 2. Moving through to question number 3. NetApp Data Fabric simplifies the complexity of what? Is it artificial intelligence, hybrid multi-cloud, applications, or security? NetApp Data Fabric simplifies the complexity of what? Now, I guess those of you who are existing customers of NetApp probably have the upper hand here. If you're not aware of this, then you can reach out to your local NetApp representative for more information. But for those who do know the answer, I'll close it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And the elves, 3/4 got it correct. That's what we're here to talk about today. It's hybrid multi-cloud. NetApp Data Fabric simplifies the complexity of hybrid multi-cloud. And I'm sure that Sean and Tom will get into that a little later on. In the meantime, moving through to the next question. Question number 4. NetApp Data Fabric keeps your data at the heart of your business for you to do what? Realize the promise of cloud, develop and deploy your applications faster, accelerate your journey to artificial intelligence, or is it D, all of the above? NetApp Data Fabric, product we just spoke about, keeps your data at the heart of your business for you to do one of these things. Which one is it? All right, I'm going to close it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. the answers. Well done, everyone. 96% of you, all of the above. Of course, NetApp Data Fabric does that and a whole lot more. As I said, Sean and Tom will undoubtedly get into that a little later on, and your NetApp representatives are here. And of course, in the follow-up for today's session to deep dive into that product. So moving through to question number 5. Thank you, Elves, by the way, doing a fantastic job. When was NetApp founded? Was it in 91, 92, 93, or 94? Decent spread there, but it can be only one of these 4. Which was it? 91, 92, 93, or 94? I wonder if there are any, well, there must be still some employees around. I'll close it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. That's it for question 5. How did we do, Elves? Wow, that's a very good result. Over half of you got that one right. So I suspect there are a few here that are vying for that top prize. Commiserations to the rest of you, 92. So coming up on their 30-year anniversary. That was question number 5. We're going to move on to the final question. It is question number 6. It is the final. So for those of you who may be battling at the top, this is going to be super important. Is NetApp an industry leader for multi-cloud? True or false? Is NetApp an industry leader for multi-cloud? I think that one's pretty straightforward. So let's get into it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it for our trivia. And 100% got it right. Congratulations. Of course they are. I'd have been quite triggered if anyone had mentioned false, but excellent. Well done to everyone. So of course, there's quite a lot of people on here today, quite a lot of people obviously participating in today's game. There are some prizes, but only for our top performers. So I think the Elves will be crunching some numbers in the background there. And when they're ready, we might see some results. But congratulations to those who've done well. And thank you all for joining. Like I said, from across Asia Pacific. And we have a tie for first. As I mentioned, Gonzo is back as the reigning champ. And Adam tied for first place on a score of 10. And we've got a tie again for, well, what would be third. Paul, Gareth, and Michael all on 9 points. So congratulations. I'll leave the Elves to work out who's getting the prizes all out of that. I think Gonzo's just voluntarily disqualified himself. Well done, Gonzo. Fallen on your sword. So that'll be Adam taking out the grand prize today, followed with Paul, Gareth, and Michael. So keep an eye on your email addresses for the Elves to be sending out some swag. So that's it for the trivia. I see you're all engaged, you're all working, you're all ready to go. Let's get into today's speakers. The reason we're all here, we're here to talk about hybrid multi-cloud, but we have some industry leaders. First is Tom Seglarek. He leads Telstra's Purple's hybrid cloud portfolio. He has over 17 years of experience in supporting, building, designing, and managing technology solutions in the media and professional services industries. Prior to Telstra Purple, Tom served as principal consultant for leading Australian systems integrator VM Tech, heading their advisory practice. Tom has also served as Director of Technology for WPP AUNZ, guiding technology strategy and operations for the largest advertising, marketing, and media group in the region. And prior to that, as CIO for the John Singleton founded STW Communications Group and Global Advertising Group, DDB. That is quite the CV, Tom. Understanding that successful technology strategies require a combination of people, process, and technology, Tom is passionate about helping companies realize the value of their technology investment by taking a thorough and holistic approach to every engagement. Most importantly, bringing pragmatic and actionable outcomes. He's responsible for developing strategy, execution models, and enablement. Tom is a founding member of Purple's Enterprise Solutions and Capability Function at Telstra Purple. Joining us today, Mr. Tom Seglarek.
Pleased to be here. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, Tom. Joining Tom today, or hosting Tom, should I say, is Sean. Sean Scott is a technologist and digital transformation specialist with over 22 years of IT experience. With a shared history working inside IT organizations, external consulting, and working for global IT vendors, Sean has a wide range of experience and knowledge learnt across those 20 plus years. working for leading financial institutions, federal and state-based government agencies, and a mixture of SMB and enterprise organizations has enabled Sean to deliver projects across a wide scale with local, regional, and global impact. While technically skilled, educated, and certified on various technologies, including cloud, cyber, storage, networking, operating systems, and applications, Sean brings to bear this combined knowledge when consulting on various business initiatives and, of course, problem solving. Sean is a leader at NetApp, a global authority in storage and data fabrics, combining on-prem, private, and public cloud data solutions with enterprise applications and service requirements. Specializing the hybrid cloud services solution portfolio for NetApp and currently enabling IT modernization and cloud adoption outcomes for all of NetApp's customers in the commercial, enterprise, federal, and service provider markets. Hosting Tom Seglerek today, please make welcome NetApp's own Sean Scott. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, Tom. I'm just going to share my screen. There's definitely a varied audience on the call, so I'll say a good morning, good afternoon to try and capture everyone. We are going to be talking about hybrid cloud today. Tom and I are going to keep it collaborative. You're not just going to be hearing us talk at you the whole time, and there is going to be some audience interaction. So stay tuned. We might ask you some questions to make sure you're paying attention. The agenda here is for everyone. There's stuff for administrators, engineers, storage managers, who I like to call my data champions, CTOs, CIOs, and cloud evangelists. So no matter what your background is, there's probably something here for you. But we are going to be talking about hybrid cloud, what that means, how to adopt it, how to be successful. Tom, anything you want to throw in there that I've missed?
No, I think that pretty much rounds it out.
Excellent.
Let's get into it.
Cool. So, as we should do with any conversation around acronyms and cloud and any new emerging tech, let's just get on the same page. Let's just make sure we've got the definitions right and we're talking about the same thing. We start off with private cloud. It makes up a very crucial part of the hybrid cloud world. And private cloud is simply those solutions that you give to a trusted partner. Could be a managed service provider offering a service you consume, could be outsourced IT, could be a range of things. Tom, this is your specialty, and I've put Telstra Purple here as the perfect example of a private cloud provider. Anything you wanted to add to my blurb there?
Yeah, look, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a managed service. It could be just something you're running in your own data center with your own team as well. But increasingly, we've seen a shift towards getting rid of those sort of mundane day-to-day tasks and letting experts like Telstra Purple take care of it for you.
Excellent. We move on to public cloud, and it's probably the simplest one of the bunch. Pretty well known. I've got the major hyperscalers listed there in Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS. And there's not much really else to say. They've got a whole range of services, a whole range of offerings that you can consume. Some require some heavy lifting, some are just a click of a button, but they're all freely available all around the world. And then we've got the culmination of those things. And I've broken them out because depending upon which website you look up and who you listen to, the definitions may be a little different, but essentially the general agreement is that when we're talking multi-cloud, we're talking multiple public clouds. When we're talking hybrid cloud, we're usually talking about a combination of private and public. That's the general agreement out there on the internet. But let's see what this looks like in reality. In the real world, we've got this thing called on-premise, where people typically have an office, a data center, and they're moving things from. And then they've got a combination of all of these things. What is really, really important to understand, and I'm going to get a lot of size out there from the people in the audience who have lived this, but if you look at a macro view of an organization, in almost all cases that I've seen in the last 5 years or so, everyone generally is using a combination of private cloud, of SaaS-based cloud services that are out there for a varying array of reasons, and varying services in the public cloud space. So when you look at an organizational view, it is actually quite hard today to find someone who is not already hybrid multi-cloud or multi-hybrid cloud, depending upon which word you want to put first. Tom, what about you? Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it necessarily isn't part of our client's strategy. It's kind of where they've ended up, because each of these kinds of cloud have their own pros and cons. So if you want to take a best of breed approach, you want to cherry pick a little bit of this, a little bit of that, put it all together. Although sometimes that hasn't even happened intentionally. It's just, the marketing department's found a really good SaaS app that they want to use. Some of your web developers have decided to take a bit of public cloud on. And before you know it, IT's got to look after the whole lot. That said, I wouldn't consider using all of these individually as being a hybrid cloud. You really need a bit more integration between them to qualify for that.
Great point, great point. And you see this a lot with companies who do a lot of mergers and acquisitions. They just naturally, get a lot of technology they didn't necessarily build or purchase themselves, as well as those companies who have shadow IT or have departments with their own buying autonomy. So moving on, I'm going to throw at you some stats just to kind of give you a view on how widely adopted cloud services are being used. Now, I've taken the viewpoint of Australia only for the purposes of that's where I'm talking to you from, and to keep the numbers quite simple to provide. But I'm going to throw it out there to the chat. So open up your chat and see if you can quickly tell me how much money do you think organizations spent on cloud services in 2020? I'm just going to wait about 5 seconds and then we'll just keep going. But I'll give you a hint. It ends with a B, not an M. I'd love to hear. We've already got some responses. Let me see what's coming through. Thank you, Paul. His answer was lots. Adam, you got the B right. Billions, that's for sure. Well, let me help you guys out there. 8.1 billion was spent, rounding, on cloud services in 2020. So it goes to show you the strength of the market. Now, moving on from that, cloud defines a lot of services. If we break it down specifically to cloud application services, or what a lot of people kind of dumb down to SaaS, that's the majority. That's 5.2 billion just there. So you see that there's a lot of sub-markets within cloud, and SaaS is certainly still a huge player in that space. In terms of private, from this Gartner survey, 60% of Australian organizations, again, are committed to using private cloud services. Any of this surprising you, Tom?
Not really. I think it's kind of a trend that we've seen for quite a few years now. As I mentioned before, customers are wanting to save their staff for high value, high visibility work within their organization, and not necessarily patching and backups and all that stuff, which is really important, but never gets fully appreciated by the business. So if you can outsource it, have a managed service that provides it more economically, that's often a good option.
Great. And the common question is posed is, well, how well is Australia doing compared to the rest of the world with cloud adoption? Or how well is APAC doing compared to other regions? Well, specifically to this survey, which is again Australian focused, Australian organizations are outpacing global cloud adoption, 18.3 to 17%. And that trend has been consistent. We have had the edge for a little while, but it just goes to show you that a lot of Australian organizations, and I extend this out to APAC as well, certain regions, are cloud first, and they've been cloud first for a while. So it is good to know that we are leaders in that space and do have a lot of maturity when it comes to cloud offerings. We are going to have a little bit of more audience interaction at this point, so I'm going to throw it over to the elves to put up the first poll. We're going to have a look at which of the major cloud offerings is the most widely used. We've got software, platform, infrastructure, and fabric. So we'll give it a few seconds. Click that button And then we will see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What are the results? Where have people put their eggs? Well, maybe it was because I gave the answer away in the stats for those people that were watching it. But yes, absolutely, SaaS. SaaS is definitely the dominant player in the cloud ecosystem, certainly at the moment. Infrastructure was a second place there. So thank you all for taking part in that. There is going to be more interaction and another poll later on. So please stay tuned. In another survey, asking specifically CIOs, what are the cloud services that they are committed to consuming? Now, private cloud leads them by far. Now, Tom, I'm going to throw to you here. What do you think is taking up the majority of this private cloud focus?
Yeah, look, I think it's just legacy. I think that's where a lot of organizations have come from, and converting to native public cloud is not a trivial matter. You know, a lot of companies have a SaaS first or a cloud first approach, and the stats show us around 20 to 30% of all the workloads in the world have ended up in public cloud so far. But that means there's still a lot that's kind of languishing, and it's often just because that conversion is a lot trickier or more expensive or disruptive than companies might have imagined first up.
Great, great. And I'm going to skip over the software, the infrastructure, and the platform as a service, because that is fairly well understood in our market today. I'm going to just focus quickly on these top three. Serverless computing, containers, and microservices kind of fall into the new technology bucket for cloud, or have been in the last few years. They take the smaller percentage here, but it's probably just because people are rolling them out slower as their default mechanism. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised by these stats, because I know a lot of the clients we talk to are interested in these sorts of platforms, but unless you're really very cloud mature and heavily invested in developing your own software platforms, we're not really seeing a lot of take up in these areas. A lot of interest, not a lot of take up.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot. Well, people are in the research phase, the advisory phase. Maybe they're doing a small testing deployment here and there, but it's certainly not mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And then this slide I want to spend a little bit of time on. Again, taken from the market. So this is probably some of you on the call took part in a survey like this. But really, this first bit, in looking at what kinds of cloud services being consumed, this points to the macro aspect of organizations, kind of touched on before. We in IT, we often gravitate to talking to other people in IT and focusing on the IT needs, but you got to keep in mind that certain cloud services have been around a lot longer and were heavily mainstreamed before IT moved their services into cloud. Things like CRM, you got finance, you got marketing in there as well. The list goes on, but a lot of those cloud-based technologies, they really set the tone early. And so you see them being the de facto standard again and again. They're all cloud first. Am I missing anything there, Tom? You think anything should be higher up that list?
Not specifically. I mean, SaaS has probably been around the longest as far as those different cloud deployment models go. So I'm not surprised to see those at the top there. And I think that also makes it easier for perhaps non-IT parts of the business to access those services too. All you need is a credit card, really. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see those really seeping in at the top.
Yeah, and I think there's a large maturity angle here where, you know, 5, maybe 10, even longer years ago, the sales team could go out and put their vote for what kind of CRM they wanted to use, and that had the buying power and was almost autonomous just to them. Likewise with finance, likewise with marketing, with the other lines of business. But I find today mature organizations are rolling everything into a macro view. They want to make sure that their views around data are consistent. They want to make sure that their cybersecurity angles are covered. For anyone that's in heavily regulated industries, maybe finance, maybe healthcare, maybe you're a government department, you need to know what's happening with your data and where these applications are being run and how they're using the data that you have. So there's a lot more focus on IT being involved in centralizing that management, or at least the visibility as a minimum. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest concern I see with using cloud services. It's usually the security angle and data sovereignty, things along those lines. So wherever there's sensitive information, they're usually the last systems to end up on any sort of cloud service.
And the next bit is around the drivers that companies have and departments have in moving to cloud. We're going to first look at the business drivers, and this, as the name implies, comes from the business. This is generally non-IT driven initiatives that say, hey, we need to modify what we're doing. We need to change our technology approach because we need these business outcomes. It's a short list, but it focuses on the main ones. You know, I see the customer service and the competitive nature of business being the main drivers to cloud. What else is missing here, Tom?
Yeah, look, I think it's quite funny that a lot of this stuff, so number 2 and number 4, for example, they're really keeping up with the Joneses. I wonder if there's a bit of, well, everyone else is doing cloud, so I should do cloud as well. But that top one there, customer service, really rings true because a lot of that is public facing. So having a public facing infrastructure to support public facing services, that makes total sense. That's not really something you want to be hosting out of your own data center.
What are the innovation aspects? Do you think companies are driving innovation as a primary focal point for the business, or do you think innovation is that kind of lagging indicator that you're mentioning about keeping up with the Joneses?
Well, I think those organizations which really want to be cutting edge will find a lot of benefit in moving to cloud platforms just because that's where a lot of development focus is these days. If you want to try out serverless or containerized workloads, you know, the easiest way to do it is in a public cloud. So it makes sense to head that way if that's what your business needs.
And you're absolutely right. And it ties directly into the technical drivers, which have that technical view of not just what does it mean for my company, for my staff, for management or deployment or administration, scalability, but also what does it mean for the technology? Where am I looking at elasticity? Where am I looking at scalability, at performance, at adoption of new functionality? And this is where it shines. So with that said, I'm sorry, Tom, go.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Excellent. I love it when people agree with me. All right, let's move on. And this particular one, I'm going to stop the stats here. I think we can move on after this one, looking at stats, but there is another graph slide, I'll warn you. This is a particularly focused survey around COVID. And this was done by Bain around single cloud or multi-cloud. What is people's view pre-COVID, post-COVID, and the rationale behind it? So you see a lot of common themes here. I mean, Tom, I've been hearing about vendor lock-in and people trying to protect against that for quite some time, but it does seem like in 2020, last year, when this was taken, there was a swing from single to multi-cloud. What were you seeing during that time, and do you think that's continuing?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of customers have ended up in a multi-cloud world simply through, you know, what's happened in their business, not necessarily even within IT's control, as I mentioned before. I think that customers have always wanted to avoid vendor lock-in because there's that fear that, you know, if you put all your eggs in one basket and it goes down, or if they suddenly decide to increase prices on you, it could decimate your budget. So being able to move workloads around between different providers gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more ability to innovate, and protects you from potential commercial impacts as well. It's always been really difficult to achieve, though, because a lot of those public cloud platforms particularly are quite proprietary. So moving apps between one and the other potentially means, you know, refactoring, re-architecting your apps. What we've seen more recently with being able to deploy the same hypervisor across multiple clouds, whether public or private, really provides a lot of that benefit of being able to shift workloads on demand without that overhead that you previously had. And we're seeing that as being quite attractive to a lot of our customers.
And I guess having that maturity or having that skill set in-house to kind of abstract yourself almost from what is the particular cloud and just focus on the service or the outcome that you're providing?
Again, yes, it's being able to put your resources towards things that are visible to the business and directly generating value.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've spoken about the reasons to go to cloud based on surveys. The last one is, what are the challenges? Where are the things that people are most concerned about? I've been hearing the same one or two things for probably over a decade now. They just still keep being the number one and the number two. Now, this survey said that all of the respondents were identifying with more than one of these. 71%, so the vast majority, were reporting up to 3 of these, and another 19% were reporting more than 3, were key concerns or fears they had around adopting cloud. Now, I've kind of grouped a few of these together because the number one problem that I've always had fed back to me is the skills shortage or the lack of skills to be able to properly adapt, migrate, and be successful in cloud has always been the number one. Have you found that, Tom? How do you think this space is evolving with skills?
Absolutely, and it's a challenge, I'm sure, not only for our clients, but for us as an organization as well. We need to continually adapt and make sure that we're as attractive to the best talent out there as possible, because it is a fierce competition. But I find that a lot of organizations who perhaps don't have the resources of a Telstra to be able to manage a center of excellence and so on internally are looking to kind of leverage that in a partner. So we are seeing significant growth in that area for Purple and for Telstra more widely.
Yeah, and I think what's happened over the last year has certainly amplified that. With COVID and with everything else that we've gone through, there's a big push to adopt cloud and also to do that right and to do it well without impacting the business negatively. So strong skills and leveraging people such as yourself to make sure that if you don't have it in-house, you may not want to build it in-house. Where do you get those from? So I think that's a very good point. Number 2 on the priority list for concerns has always been cost. And this has been a grey area. A lot of people have their metrics on how they look at cloud adoption and how they compare costs, but cost has always been a strong concern. Do you think the cost modelling, Tom, has changed over the last 5 years? Do you think people are fairly set in their view on how to measure cost?
Look, I don't think so. I think everything from how it's recognised internally in accounting systems through to just the nature of the technology changing so often and the associated billing models changing, it's really hard to kind of maintain a cost model for your cloud estate. That's an area also that we've seen a lot of interest from our clients in, being able to help them model all of this out, work on chargeback, showback models. It really is a complex area, but one that can provide a lot of benefit, a lot of transparency to the business if you get it right.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree or reinforce and support that point even more. You've got to understand that cost modeling is a lot bigger and more complex when you take into account cloud, because it's not just assets that you hold and run and maintain. It's a lot of services, a lot of factors. But also cybersecurity is in here as well. Cybersecurity, probably the third ranked general fear, general concern. Anything you want to say around cybersecurity as people work and adapt and thrive in a hybrid cloud world?
Yeah, look, I think we saw a bit of that caution thrown to the wind during COVID when everyone just was scrambling madly to get solutions out there. We're seeing a lot of companies now take a step back and have a look at what they've done and make sure it does meet their security policies and well-architected frameworks. I think, yeah, that especially among regulated industries and legislative controls, we are definitely seeing a lot more focus on that this year, once again.
Great. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward. And when talking about why hybrid and how to navigate that in your customer's environment, I'm going to hand the talking stick over to you, Tom. Why don't you lead us through this next section?
Absolutely. Well, these are kind of the reasons why we're seeing customers embrace hybrid cloud within Telstra Purple. And I guess scalability is the first aspect. It's always been the bugbear of a private cloud in that it has a finite capacity. And if you need to burst above that, particularly if it's only for a period of time, it can be difficult to justify the costs involved in doing that. So that ability to be able to burst into cloud-based resources that you only consume for perhaps an hour at a time, that's a significant advantage and significant interest to our clients. You know, whether you need to scale up and scale back down, you finally got that capability. And bear in mind also with programs like NetApp Keystone, we can achieve similar outcomes with on-prem equipment much more easily than we could back in the day as well. Is that something you're seeing clients ask about as well, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we all experienced the good old days where everything was on-prem, and scalability was a challenge because you couldn't just go out there and elastically scale up or out. But with private cloud or with public cloud, with hybrid, having the tool sets is number one, and the skills number two. But it's definitely something you can easily do now. And people who are architecting this properly are having effortless scalability. So I think it is a factor, but it's a huge driver for hybrid cloud adoption.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Moving on, having all of these different cloud estates to manage isn't trivial. They all have their own CLIs, they all have their own management tools and interfaces, and they often change very quickly. So being on top of that is no small feat. I think having that sort of unified management across your entire cloud estate, including connectivity, public, private clouds, that's a huge benefit of a mature hybrid cloud approach. You know, you don't have to relearn everything potentially. Platforms such as VMware and Nutanix all offer the ability to manage your estates in a unified fashion. And if their environments are used to, your skills can now translate to any sort of cloud environment. It goes back to what you were saying before, Sean, in terms of skills being a really tricky area for cloud adoption.
Yeah, and I think it's a real point of awareness on what is your cloud strategy as an organization. You know, are you going all in with one cloud, with one hyperscaler and one set of tools that whoever is going to be your cloud expert team, they're going to have to learn those? Or are you going to take advantage of the multi-cloud homogeneous tools that allow you to deliver your outcomes no matter what cloud it's on? That, you know, companies like NetApp, providers like Telstra Purple all specialize in and have access to. You know, there's a lot of advantages for doing it that way as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't have put it better myself. For security and compliance, we've already touched on this, but look, it's frequently one of the greatest concerns in terms of moving potentially sensitive data, particularly into estates that you don't necessarily control yourself, that you can't see and touch. But hybrid cloud really gives you flexibility around that. You're no longer restricted to going whole hog into public cloud. You can keep the more sensitive workloads on premises, perhaps move them to the cloud temporarily if you need to, or if regulations change. You're really not locked into any one hypervisor or public or private clouds. We really find it does give you the most flexibility when it comes to security and compliance needs.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch the journey. As you know, many years ago, there was very hard decisions you had to make about cloud adoption. If you wanted certain security or certain compliance to be met, you had to do some very distinct things and make some very big investments to go all in certain areas. Whereas even though some compliance requirements have gone up, the bar for achieving those outcomes and getting compliance and security awareness has dropped significantly. I mean, there are several tools you can easily apply, regardless if you're not wholeheartedly adopting cloud. You can still use those cloud tools to get those outcomes.
Absolutely. Considering flexibility and agility, this really comes down to what we spoke about earlier, in that clouds are constantly evolving, and what you might find as a really good PaaS solution on one cloud one day could be bettered by a competitor the next. Historically, if you'd gone all in on one hyperscaler, you're locked into their proprietary interfaces, APIs, and so on. It was really hard and difficult to justify the cost and effort of making that transition to a different public cloud. But we now have this true approach of workload portability where it's much simpler to be able to take a workload from one cloud to another without re-architecting, without recoding, and just plumb it into public cloud services on demand. It is that concept of having your workloads cloud adjacent so that they're not in the native environment, but they can plug into the native environment and tools whenever you need to. We've seen quite a few of our customers head down this path. It kind of gives you the ability to take on native public cloud services on a pace that suits you. It's not a big bang sort of upfront cloud transformation. It's leverage the tools that are in the public clouds when it suits your business.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the poster child for cloud adoption. Flexibility and agility kind of wrote the book on why people adopted cloud in the first place. But I think we've evolved as a market and as a technology now, or a set of technologies, that you can achieve the same outcomes in a variety of ways that may not mean you had to do the same steps or use the same cloud-based technologies you had to 5 years ago. You mentioned Keystone from NetApp as being one of those ways. I know Telstra Purple has a lot of services that you can get the same flexible and agile outcomes via a whole variety of different deployment options. It just comes down to what you need as an organization. What's the application? What's the need? What's the business outcome?
Absolutely. And finally, portability. We've spoken about this already, but you really now have that ability to move workloads around without constraints of having to refactor, re-architect, recode your applications. We talked about this for years, but it's actually taken a while for it to be a reality, and we finally are here now. So, you know, maintain flexibility, maintain your options, and don't lock into one cloud upfront when who knows what the best option for you might be tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, portability specifically related to data is something I talk about every day. And it's probably one of the most undervalued aspects of a solution choice that you can have, but it really hits you hard if you don't think about it. I know from a data aspect, it's never been easier to achieve the data portability across not just one location, but all locations. If only there was a technology that had a seamless way to deploy data in any location faster than anything else, that would not be good. But, you know, I'll call out specifically one thing. I'll call out test dev. Well, test dev, backup, and DR, to name a few. You never need portability so much as when you're looking at the time it takes to spin up, update, or run something that you desperately need to in those environments. And that's when portability really hits home. And the data fabric plug there.
There it is.
Certainly applies. Well, before I go on and steal the mic back, Tom, is there anything you wanted to say there before we completely move on?
No, please, by all means.
Excellent. So more industry feedback. So as you can see, I like to take what you all are saying, what the industry experts and what the technologists out there are recapping. Taken from VMware, this is a very good CIO roadmap on how to adopt hybrid and multi-cloud. You can apply it in general to all cloud adoption, but this is in essence your manual on how to safely, maturely, and successfully adopt cloud. Now, I know a lot of you will be thinking the same thing as I initially did when I saw this. It's like, oh my God, that looks like a lot of work. Well, you're right in one extent. There is a lot here, but for something so strategic and important as lifting and shifting or moving your technology, your business outcomes, your critical business data to a new platform, you really do need to go through the due diligence of something like this. Specifically, you'll see a few things mentioned again and again. Preparing and educating your organization. I know, Tom, you and I feel very strongly about the people part of people, process, and technology. But it is crucial. I mean, you must have seen a lot of situations where it's saved an organization as well as hurt an organization by doing it or not doing it well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of a founding tenet of Telstra Purple, and it's where the name comes from. People and purpose, or people providing purpose for technology. Contraction of people and purpose, Purple. But it really is that wider consideration of what are you actually trying to achieve with this? Being able to talk to all of your business stakeholders and really get a view of what is the tangible benefit to the business? What do they expect to see out of it? What do they, how do they define success? If you're not asking those sorts of questions and kind of heading down a path, and as I mentioned, a lot of companies had to do this in the panic of COVID last year. But we're seeing a lot of customers kind of take some missteps and indulge in some regrettable spend or end up in scenarios where they're investing a lot more money than they thought they would to achieve a certain outcome. So really taking the time to lay a proper foundation for your cloud approach, including education, negotiation with business stakeholders, all of that is really important to achieve any measurable level of success.
Yeah, and whether you're doing this for an entire organizational strategy, if you're adopting a cloud framework or trying to roll one out, if you're trying to do a digital transformation across the company, that's fairly involved. It requires a lot of research and a lot of collaboration to do it. But I can already hear all of the engineers on this call going, but it's so simple, I can just sign up and do it. And you're absolutely right, you can. And that's the short-term versus long-term view. Both can be successful. But the more areas of the business you impact, the more due diligence and research and collaboration you need beforehand to avoid those pitfalls. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Now, to back that up, a separate set of information from our buddies at Gartner have taken the lessons learned. Again, this was taken from C-levels, so it's keeping the audience the same. But it's taken the lessons learned from doing cloud migrations, from digitally transforming applications and services and teams over into the cloud world. You see a match here, right? It's not just me. You see a good match between looking at the macro view of an organization, this skills piece, number 2, it's all skills. Have your cloud center of excellence. I'm going to time myself. Tom, where are cloud centers of excellence being established? Are they all in-house? Are they all in the private sector? Where are they going? Where are they coming from?
Mm-hmm. Look, I think we're seeing a lot of it in the news across, your ASX 200 companies. A lot of them have realized that they need to skill up internally to keep pace with the innovation that we see in the cloud space. But a lot of smaller organizations just don't have the resources to be able to have that in-house. And it makes more sense for them to partner with an organization who can kind of provide that as a service, provide targeted assistance, architecture, consultation to be able to come up with an appropriate strategy, make sure that the engagement with the business is there, and be able to really smooth over all of these lessons learned, as it were, to make sure you're not tripped up along the way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And if I look at number 3 here, it's the right cloud workloads going to the right place. I personally worked with a lot of organizations across the years, particularly probably 5 years ago was a huge turning point where I found that people had super aggressively jumped into cloud first and everything was being thrown into public clouds without really that due diligence approach of what we see here on the left. And a lot of those same people, companies, services had to be pulled back out because either the application wasn't ready, the costs seemingly were an unknown that became too high, or there just wasn't that same level of business engagement and interaction to keep everything going the way it was before. I mean, what do you see in terms of the pivotal decisions to make the right choice here? Is it just more research and more investigation at the start?
It is, but I think even that's hard to do on your own when a lot of our audience will have a lot of BAU work to look after. That sort of innovation tends to take a back seat. So putting in that investment into some upfront advisory work, consulting can really pay a lot of dividends down the track. You know, it might seem like a bit of cash up front, but we found that often reduces your expenses by potentially half down the track. You know, by avoiding those sort of pitfalls and just not knowing what you don't know.
I would agree. I agree completely. Now, according to VMware this time, the top 4 hybrid cloud use cases: cloud migration. Now I'm going to focus on applications here. It could be business critical apps, it could be your day-to-day, it could be your local intranet, it could be a bunch of things, but typically lifting and shifting that from a typical on-premise workload to cloud is a huge focus and probably the #1 area that people are engaging or investigating hybrid cloud. Do you see the same thing, Tom? Are you seeing cloud migrations taking up the majority of people's focus?
Yeah, look, and it's potentially not the smartest way to go, just a straight lift and shift of all your workloads as they are. You really want to be able to tailor them to take advantage of the cloud platforms you're moving to. But we are seeing a lot of organizations kind of going, look, let's just move it in there and then deal with it, then optimize, which, you know, works. And if that's kind of within your budgetary realm, by all means. Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of lift and shift at this stage.
Yeah, and you know, not to discourage that, people have achieved great success, huge milestones of achievement, technical performance by doing that well. It certainly happens all the time, and we're a cloud-first organization and support that. I think the main point there is just looking at what it means to your business. So is your business ready for that? And doing the checking to make sure that you're compatible. You're compatible now versus you're compatible within 180 days post-deployment. The next one is extending the data center. So maybe I'll throw over to you here, Tom. Can you talk to us about extending the data center into the cloud, what that means?
Absolutely. So I guess we now have the benefit of being able to run the same hypervisor across multiple cloud platforms. So as we mentioned before, if you need to, if there's a spike in demand and you need a bit more capacity, you can dial that up on a per hour basis and be able to consume that as you do your private cloud. So that's a huge benefit. We had a healthy food delivery company, a customer of ours, who during COVID saw a huge spike in demand for their prepackaged meals. Conversely, they would have had to wait, 6, 8, 10 weeks before for hardware and integration to scale out their data center footprint. But with the hybrid cloud approach we've furnished them with, they're able to add extra hosts within minutes. So they were easily able to meet the demand they were seeing from their customers, which was really not anticipated at all.
And I guess, looking at these situations, we're not necessarily looking at a 100% migration of a service or an application. It could be incremental, it could be test dev, it could be greenfields, it could be a bunch of different types of deployments relating to an application or a service. DR is something very popular to take what has historically been a very costly and cumbersome operation to manage multiple sites. One of them you may never need, well, hopefully you don't have an outage that you need to fail over, but cloud, whether it's public, private, or hybrid, makes a perfect location for DR. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'd say this is the #1 use case that we're seeing, or usually the first step that customers are willing to take. Doubling your infrastructure in the hope that you never have to use half of it, not the best financial approach. So being able to simply consume cloud storage as a DR strategy, and then standing that up into a functioning data center within a public cloud, only in the event of an actual DR, that's really powerful. And we're seeing costs of DR potentially decrease by about 90% if you take that sort of pilot-like approach. So DR is absolutely very, very suitable for a hybrid scenario.
Yeah, I guess, this comes back to that skills point we mentioned before, and that people have an almost unlimited variety of services to choose from with almost the same number of providers. But again, if you get the right skills to advise here, you can get the right outcome relatively simply. And then you've got your next generation apps. And these are the new services, could be microservices, could be AI, could be robotics, augmented reality, whatever it is. A lot of these things are built in the cloud for the cloud, but you still have to integrate it into your business. You've still got to manage it, optimize it, etc. This would still be a great fit for hybrid, wouldn't you think, Tom?
Absolutely. So if you want to fire up a DevSecOps CI/CD pipeline, it's really easy to do that in a public cloud, but you don't want to have that as a silo that's entirely separate to the rest of your infrastructure. So if you can build that within a hybrid cloud environment, you've kind of got the best of both worlds.
Now, I've seen a huge evolution as well with containers, something that was pretty much born in the cloud for the cloud, but people still wanted to do or needed to do it on premise or under their control. I've seen a huge evolution in terms of the toolkits to manage that operation, both on-prem, private and public, almost abstracting the physical layer. I know we've got one that we love to talk about. I know you work on this all the time. That continues to evolve, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that attraction of having containers living alongside VMs, living alongside native public cloud PaaS platforms, that's really, the best of all worlds.
Great. And here are two personas. I know I talk to these people all the time. I know you do too, Tom. You've got Susan, single cloud, and to the Susans on the call, I apologize. This is probably not related to you, but this person is 100% into their cloud of choice. They may live and breathe and eat and sleep AWS or Azure or GCP or other cloud, and no matter what the need is, that's where it's going. On the other hand, Henry Hybrid, by the way, I didn't mean for that to become their last name, just happy coincidence, is a best of breed person. Henry goes, look, I don't really care where it is or what it's on. It is the best tool for the job, and we will assess and decide individually, and then roll in all of the business automation, process tools, visibility, etc. There's a pretty stark difference. Tom, are you seeing more of one or the other here, or is it fairly even out there in the world?
I'd say it's actually fairly even. I think there's definitely customers who kind of go, look, I don't want the integration is really the difference between these two scenarios. Some customers don't want the hassle of having to do integration for themselves. They're willing to accept, kind of okay performance from all of the bits of their solution and just get it from the one place. It makes it simple, not necessarily best of breed, but good enough. On the other hand, we have customers who demand best of breed. They will not accept anything except the very best. And the cost of that, in terms of being able to integrate all of those services, if they come from different providers, that's a price that they're willing to pay, because the benefit that they get from optimizing each of the components of their application landscape outweigh the integration costs for them. So it really comes down to the individual client circumstances, I think.
And I think the real difference here as well is, are you having a micro or a macro discussion? I mean, if you're having a micro discussion around a particular project, a particular application, a small group of owners in the business that need to decide the outcome, it's relatively simple to get to your outcome because you know what's the business approach, you've got your advisory. But in a macro view, Tom, I'm imagining for you, it's quite complex being the trusted advisor, bringing in your cloud team or your service experts. You've got to navigate all those political waves, and you've got to really understand where people are coming from before giving any final piece of advisory. Have I got that?
Absolutely. So, and that's what we do day in, day out. I think we've seen the pitfalls, we've lived through them ourselves, perhaps in past lives as well. So we kind of know the questions to ask, how to get everyone on the same page and really get the buy-in that you need to make this a success. And we can help you figure out which one of these two personas better applies to you as well. There's pros and cons on both sides. So we know what to ask, what to investigate, what data to collect to help you make that decision really the best informed you can.
Thank you, Tom. And just from Gonzo on the call there, he mentioned we need a Nancy NetApp in customer environments. Doesn't that already exist? I thought that was a thing. Maybe not. But moving on. Summarizing, what are the major reasons, factors, conversations that people have to get across in order to properly assess the world out there and choose between single cloud of choice, multi-cloud of choice, multi-hybrid cloud of choice, all of the above? We have covered these somewhat. I think all of them are important. All of them require due diligence. But I think probably the most important aspect is getting the right information and the right people involved. Having that skill set, getting away from anyone who may be one-eyed or biased on a technology, and getting the people in who are truly independent agnostic advisors to talk about the best approach for you. I think that's pretty much what you do on a daily basis, Tom. But is there anything on this list that you think needs further mentioning?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it. In fact, you've taken the words right out of my website.
Excellent. And with that said, let's get on to our second poll. I hope you've all been paying attention. Mr. Moderator, or the elves in the background, please throw up our second poll. All right, we have technology out there. It's on the new wave of technologies which bring cloud services into your branch or remote office, integrating what the hyperscalers provide quickly and easily to your premise, to your operations. Some can be a black box, some can be truly extensible. But there is a word for this. Is it cloud robo? Is it branch cloud? Is it distributed cloud? Or is it cloud one? As the elevator music sounds in the background, I'll give you 3 more seconds, and then 3, 2, 1. If we can show the results, what did the people say? Well, 2 from 2. Well done, everyone. You got it. Distributed cloud. It is the thing. It is what a lot of people are talking about, and we're talking about it too. There's this framework, there's an approach, there's a style of thinking. We talk about edge core cloud. Now, you can look at them independently, you can build for them independently, but really the holistic approach, the approach which integrates edge and core and cloud together quickly, easily, powerfully, is usually the winning approach. Before we just jump through to the next slide, Tom, are you seeing distributed cloud take off?
Absolutely. There's a lot of interest in Edge, and we've announced some partnerships with some of the leading hyperscalers recently, where we're potentially looking to deploy some of those Edge locations within the wider Telstra Exchange network. So it's a game of being able to provide cloud services at a lower latency where that's important to your application. So everything from infrastructureless branches to video recognition. There are a lot of use cases that are coming up, and we're seeing more and more questions from our clients about it.
Yeah. We're certainly having a lot of conversations around, avoiding that lock-in in any aspect, but having a powerful engine in your premises or under your control, through either you, the end customer, end IT, or through your trusted provider, that allow you to take advantage of whatever cloud you want from wherever you are in your ecosystem. And having multiple clouds mean having a mature solution. So it's definitely something that people are talking about. With that said, let me move straight on, and I'm going to pass this back to you, Tom, because you're the expert here on how people are navigating this. So over to you.
Yeah, look, thanks, Sean. I think it's clear that hybrid clouds potentially have a lot of moving parts. There's a public, there's a private element, there's the connectivity, there's the management to bring it all together. It seems overly complex, but really it doesn't have to be. We've come up with a construct to help our customers navigate this landscape and quickly get to some solutions that they can use as the basis of a strategy, and we can work with them to then refine it to their particular needs. So if we move along to the next slide, we're calling this the cloud continuum. So at either end of this, we have our public and our private cloud options. Regardless of that, you want to have data protection and connectivity that spans the entire estate. And finally, around that, you want to have a security wrap to make sure that you're providing appropriate cyber controls around all of your technology stack. So whilst you might, a client might start here in the private cloud area and aspire to be in the public cloud, the truth is we find they usually end up somewhere in the middle and consume a bit of both. So we really need to have some offerings at every point of this continuum to help our clients pick a technology stack that best suits their needs and really lets them cut through a lot of confusion, get to something tangible, and then build on it to make sure it's customized to their needs. For example, over at this end, if a customer has particularly heavy storage or performance requirements, and they have a requirement for dedicated private hardware, perhaps in their own data center, we have traditional FlexPod solutions, which we've worked with for many years, are proven and loved by many customers. Moving along though, if we find customers have a bit more linear growth between their compute and storage requirements, perhaps they don't need to have that equipment on premises, they want to host it in a data center, we have HCI solutions like the NetApp HCI platform that we can provide as a service with that unified stack. Where customers want to start to dip their toe into the cloud, we can start to integrate things like VMware Cloud on AWS. And for those a bit more security conscious, you can actually consume dedicated hosts in that environment so that you're not sharing underlying hardware, and that can often allay a lot of fears or regulatory requirements around that data sovereignty piece. We can also do the same with shared hosts for those customers who perhaps don't have such stringent requirements and are looking for a bit of a cheaper entry point into the cloud stack. Perhaps they don't need, the 2 hosts that are required as a minimum in VMC. We can just offer a slice of those if needs be. Moving then into more cloud native architectures, for example, if a client is heavily invested into the Azure stack, but they need some low latency access at the edge, we can integrate things like Edge Stack and Cloud Volumes ONTAP to really provide that sort of data fabric across all of the estate. And finally, for those organizations who are entirely born in the cloud, well, they still have data management concerns that they need to look after. And Cloud Volumes ONTAP integrated with your hyperscaler of choice really is a very powerful tool that we can help with. And this is really the process that we like to work through with our clients to be able to get that sort of engagement with the business, the understanding of what's going to be a success for them, and be able to cut through all of these different options to get through to something that really provides some value. We always recommend having an adoption strategy, performing that readiness assessment and workload assessment to understand your existing estate, be able to then start to optimize that estate for a cloud before we start to do the actual migration in conjunction with a foundation to make sure that all of our architectures are matching up to best practice. And then the ongoing managed services, ensuring governance, ensuring that we can further optimize workloads as technology and business needs allow. That really helps us cover the entire life cycle around a cloud transformation.
Excellent, thanks, Tom. If you're seeing this slide, because my video has a little pause in it, this is our methodology for having those similar conversations around hybrid multi-cloud. So this is largely around understanding where companies are coming from, what are your business objectives, what are your technical objectives, but also looking at where does the data need to live, what behaviors, what attributes do we need to apply, and then taking it all the way through this cycle gives a full spectrum view on client needs, application needs, forward-looking, as well as covering off the business critical items on cost, performance, scalability, and reliability. So similar outcomes, more advisory piece done well before any action is taken. But I think a lot of similarity, Tom, with what you just went through in terms of understanding everything beforehand, leveraging the technology available and integrating in with a forward-looking plan.
Yeah, get it right the first time, because going back to rework your solution can be very cost prohibitive and potentially disruptive to your business.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And look, yeah, absolutely. So on top of your hybrid cloud platform, there are things you need to consider, such as having that unified data protection, whether that's backup, DR, any of those sorts of aspects. Data management, so managing unstructured data. We perhaps have a data fabric that lets us bring together all of those pools of storage across your entire cloud estate. But within that, you need to be able to make sure it's being tiered onto the most appropriate tier of storage, that your stale data is being removed or managed appropriately. And being able to classify data is becoming increasingly a requirement for many regulated industries. There are a lot of tools that can help with that sort of process as well. The head of our security practice, Stuart Lowe, has a law we've dubbed Slo's Law, which really says that security should be at least 10% of everything you do. So we really like to bake in those sorts of solutions, whether it's endpoint detection and response, managed detection and response, segmentation of networks within your virtual data center. All of these approaches really are a lot easier to implement when they're part of the design initially and not something they retrofit on afterwards. And finally, managed services. So you don't want to have your guys tucked away in the back room looking after things that really no one sees and appreciates. They're important, but they're not going to win you any awards. So it really does make sense for a lot of clients who perhaps don't have the capacity to do it all in-house anyway, to bring in a trusted partner to help them work through these sorts of services and provide more of an outcome than just a technology platform.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a really good point, Tom. You know, we've seen a lot of companies over the combined course of our careers do things incredibly well, and some who have struggled and gone the opposite way. But IT and technology areas within organizations really fight to get out of that firefighting BAU workload where they're just responding all the time. And it's not where anyone wants to be, but it's the common perception. Whereas if you do, whether it's hybrid cloud or whether it's an application move or a consolidation project, no matter what it is, you can easily move IT from a firefighting BAU to a visionary aspect where you're proactive and you're working on things that are ahead of the curve and not responding. Okay, we're going to have a very quick look at what some of you said to me to share with others around cloud, and then we're going to go straight into questions because I am aware of the time. So stick with me and get your questions ready because I'll be throwing back to Andrew shortly. So these are real feedback from C-levels and other people out there that I've spoken to. For simplicity, because a lot of people did not or could not have their names shared because of where they come from, where they work, I've just stripped them all out. So you won't find a name, but they are real people, I promise you. This is general advice and recommendations that people have been given or have given us based on their experience. So they are different. Okay, I'm not going to read them out again for time, but because you're all experienced, you can read them yourself. But they are showcasing different things. I mean, this first one is outlining the fact that no system is perfect. You've got to plan for outages, and certainly with cloud, because it's not in your premises, you've got to plan for when it's no longer contactable. Anything you wanted to add to that, Tom? It's a pretty important point.
Absolutely. I think customers don't always take into account the shared responsibility model when it comes to cloud platforms that, you know, hyperscalers will protect you to a point or protect the infrastructure to a point, but managing the data within that infrastructure is still largely up to you. So if, you know, if there's malicious deletion or even accidental deletion of data, you need to have a way to get back from that, because there's not much that Azure or AWS can do around that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what the second comment from this person says is really, regardless of what system you use, regardless of where it is, having a solid framework and platform for visibility, tracking, reporting, response is crucial. And we've certainly seen that as people have adopted hybrid cloud, having a single agnostic framework that looks at all technologies is priceless. And it's one of the things that are consistent from everyone who's been successful. They have this. So I would strongly recommend that people look into that as well, and not just how to do it, but how to have visibility and report on it moving forward.
Yeah, and it's an area that's evolving very quickly as well. To be frank, a lot of the tools in this area sucked originally, but we've seen a lot of development in perhaps just the past 12 to 18 months. There are some really great tools for this out there now. Things that will cater to sort of any budget range. So by all means, have a good look at the market, and we can help you with that stuff as well.
Yep. If you're unsure, go to your nearest NetApp person. I'm sure they'll put you in the right direction. And some more feedback, this time around single versus multi versus hybrid. Okay. Again, different perspectives. Could this be a Susan Single, a hybrid Henry, a NetApp Nancy from Gonzo? Plug that in there. It is varied, and people have been successful with all of them. It's not about that choice necessarily, it's more about the approach, wouldn't you say, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. It's horses for courses. There's no right answer for this. It really comes down to what suits your organization best, and just you need a good way to figure out what that is before you head down one of these paths.
Yeah, and the right advisory up front.
Mm.
And lastly, the all-important dollar. Everyone knows that everything comes back to cost eventually. TCO is driving a lot of projects. It could be the first priority, could be the second, could be the last, depending upon where you're coming from. But this particular feedback has cost always being important, but it is important also to marry it against those other critical factors. How are you finding the cost proposal, Tom? Are you finding that it's fairly standard? You can deliver the cost proposal in the same format for everyone? Or is there some differences on how people want to see it?
Yeah, it very much varies. It comes down to, what your internal accounting practices are and how you handle showback and chargeback. So it all very much varies between clients. I think the important thing to take into account is don't just look at your kind of day one, day two costs, what your transformation is costing, but what this is actually going to cost you over 3 to 5 years, because that can often change the story. And I mean, if you're excited about cloud and you want to craft your numbers in a certain way that makes it look good, by all means, just look at that upfront part. But if you really want to see the implications of any transformation like this, you need to look at that sort of 3 to 5 year term to make a proper comparison.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So with that said, it's time to wrap and get into Q&A. Key takeaways has to be your strategy. Do it well, get some help. You've got cloud skill sets externally, definitely. Maybe you've got some internally. And you've always got to marry up, not just cost, but performance, innovation, what's driving your business, what's important to you. So that's my 3. For more information, there's a whole bunch of points here. All of the regular sites, I'm sure, probably not surprising anyone with those locations. We have the great resources at purple.telstra.com. Tom, is there any guidance you want to give people on where to go to get help?
Look, pretty much everyone's got a Telstra client executive they can reach out to, or there is a form on the Purple website if you'd like to get in touch directly. We'd be happy to help anyone out.
Fantastic. That being said, I'm going to stop my screen, hand back to Andrew, and then let's see what you, the audience, have to ask.
Don't all jump up at once.
No, dead right. Well, there was a lot to cover there, gents. So I guess, top line, if there are people in the audience that have some questions for either Sean or Tom, the pair of them, there we go. We've got one come through the chat. The Q&A function is there. That is interesting. So we've got a question from the audience here asking about data volumes, and specifically what's the biggest amount of data volume that you've seen move to the cloud? Now, I guess that is probably on a case-by-case client basis. Let's talk about a workload. Tom, maybe do you want to start with that?
Sure. Look, I think we've seen up to about 6 petabytes personally. And I think that's been through a few different iterations of how that's stored. It's a lot of digital media, really. So it doesn't compress or dedupe well. And yeah, it certainly hasn't been an easy ride, but we're keeping an eye on how this industry changes as well. The best solution today is not going to be the best solution tomorrow.
Sure. And I guess, how long would something like that take, and what are some of the challenges that you'd encounter moving that kind of volume?
It was, I think it was over a year to get it there. Given that it wasn't, a hurry to do it, they were more about getting it right. It wasn't really something that we're pushing the time frame in terms of getting the transfer done. Yeah.
But thankfully, I mean, I guess that's a good moment for everyone to take stock and say, right, if you're looking to move that amount of data, you've got to plan well in advance. Sean, a question for you. We're all here on Zoom. I wish we were all together in person, but I guess we're able to experience a session like this with everyone across Asia Pacific, but not everyone's been able to adapt so quickly. So, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, what effects are you seeing on skills in skill shortages, more importantly, in the cloud space?
Well, it's a really good question. I think what our last year has taught us is that the old adage that you always had to fly someone in has really been disproven. Yeah. And there were a lot of situations where someone had to see someone jump on a plane and fly in from very, very far away to show the importance to the customer. But we have so much skill in our region, in your country specifically, that you don't need to go outside. That yes, you can use Zoom and a whole bunch of other conferencing tools to get people in from wherever. But as the stats shown in the very beginning, Australia and other parts of APAC, we lead the world in cloud adoption. There are some very, very smart, experienced people here that we should be leveraging more.
That's great. I mean, it's fantastic to have some silver linings in all of this, of course. And Tom, I guess a question for you as we kind of wrap. Do you see software as a service platforms offering more services for data backup and management, or kind of a consolidation of their offerings, not just through this year, but, projections in the industry? Keen to get your thoughts.
Absolutely. I think SaaS platforms are becoming increasingly key to all of our business operations, Office 365, Salesforce, who isn't using those? And you still have that shared responsibility model towards your data in those apps. So it really is important to maintain data backups and have business continuity plans around those, because the SaaS providers will only kind of protect you to a point. We're seeing a lot of interest from our clients around that area, and there are some quite mature tools in that space now. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on your policy, your strategy, and then working with a partner to deliver a solution that's going to protect your data no matter where it is.
I couldn't think of a better note to end on. Thanks, thanks, Tom, and thank you, Sean, for hosting today. Thank you, Tom Seglerek from Telstra Purple, for joining our session today here at the NetApp Amplify series. That's it for today's session. We've hit the 2:30 mark on Eastern Daylight Savings Time, and across Asia Pacific, others getting into their lunch breaks. We do have a quick feedback form here. You've got the QR code again available for your mobile device, or the URL is in the chat. Keep an eye out in your email addresses for those of you who do complete this. A lucky few will be going home with some swag today. So scan the QR code, grab the URL in the chat, fill in your quick feedback. And I guess that's it as we wrap today's session of the Amplify series. As I said, it is a series today. We were exploring a hybrid multi-cloud. Previously, we've been through healthcare and a number of other topics. So reach out to your local NetApp representative for more information on the rest of the series and, of course, some of the products and solutions that have been talked about today. Thank you again to NetApp Sean Scott and Telstra Purple's Tom Seglarek for a very engaging conversation. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again in the cloud.